A big thanks to Gymnastic Planet for supporting this episode. Gymnastics is a challenging sport, but having the right tools in your gym bag really does help. Gymnastic Planet is a leading manufacturer and distributor of essential training kit. They provide the best quality products, including world-class speed equipment, handguards, and chalk. They also specialise in club services like venue design, maintenance, and installation. Backed by decades of experience, from competing and coaching to club management, Gymnastic Planet aims to help gymnasts succeed and enjoy their craft. If you'd like to find out more, visit gymnasticplanet.com. In this episode of the Sam Oldham podcast, I'm joined by Rhys McClenaghan, the Paris 2024 Olympic champion. Rhys made history for Ireland, becoming the first gymnast ever to simultaneously hold the European, Commonwealth, World and Olympic title on the pommel horse, and this is his story. Rhys, thanks for joining us, mate.
Thank you for having me. It sounds so weird, you just sitting in front of me saying those words. I've been a big fan of your podcast, and thank you for continuing making great gymnastics content.
Well, it's very kind of you, mate. This is one of the episodes I've always wanted to do. Our paths have crossed.
Yeah.
I spent time training with your coach in Huntingdon when I was a lot younger, and I've followed your journey somewhat from afar, and I'm a massive, massive fan of the work that you've done, and also following your career arc, I think, particularly over the last Olympic cycle. It's been really, really cool to watch that. And having chatted to you today, and you had the opportunity to be in the gym and do some filming with you, and just seeing the role model that you are to all of those other guys, many of which are senior gymnasts and are your teammates as well. It's very obvious to see when they talk about you, they hold you in such high regard. I think that's a great credit to you and your character. So
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for giving us that time, being so generous this weekend, mate. Let's go to the start, mate. Can you tell me a little bit about, do you remember your first experience of gymnastics? Or is it blurry, that memory?
No, it's pretty clear. I think a lot of things about my gymnastics career are a lot more clear than anything else in life. And I feel like that's just because I've given it that importance. I've always, recalled it so many times so that it's always stayed pretty clear. So my earliest memories for sure were like dressing up as Spider-Man and learning how to do a backflip on my garden trampoline. It was just like my favorite thing to do was just do tricks on the trampoline, jump off my shed onto the trampoline, climb trees. And like a lot of people would see, climbing trees as not gymnastics, whereas for me that is completely the start of it. Any kind of movement in any way, or scaring yourself in any way, for me is like the beginning of a gymnast. So that my mum and dad saw that. My auntie done gymnastics, and I think that's kind of what triggered the idea for them to bring me to a local gymnastics club. So it was just my local leisure centre. They had like the wooden benches, the small crash mat. That was about it. But even the most simple equipment setup was enough to get me hooked on gymnastics.
What was it that you loved about it in the beginning, Rhys? Was it that freedom and being able to explore your body and seeing the world as like a giant climbing frame?
Yeah, it was exactly that. I just didn't feel like anything else kind of lent itself to, just moving your body in that way and then being rewarded for it in the form of like, you got a new skill. You learned something new, and look at this awesome thing you just learned. It's almost like pushing your mind and your body past what you would deem a limit. I'm sure you get this a lot of time when you even mention to adults about like, oh yeah, go to an adult gymnastics club, learn a handstand, learn a backflip, and they're like, me learn a backflip? No. But that doesn't really exist for kids. And I think that's the importance of getting into gymnastics at a young age, is that you don't really have those limits set yet. You only kind of have them set when you're going into later life. So I'm glad now. But even just from that aspect, I'm glad I went to gymnastics, because I grew up thinking I was like superhuman and feeling like it too.
Yeah. Was it an instant connection you had with pommel horse when you started gymnastics, Rhys, or did that come a little bit later? Because it's the type of apparatus that you either love it or you hate it. But the guys that really enjoy it, they seem to, something just clicks. It's like a natural connection from the get-go. Yeah,
from a young age, I was really good at circles on mushroom. It was very clear that I could just do the most circles out of anybody in the group by a lot. I don't know if it's a lot that I done now. I think I'm wanting to say about 75 circles at the age of 8.
Okay.
There's probably 8-year-olds now doing like nearly 1,000, I'm sure. But at the
Yeah.
time, and in the group I was in, I just remember being like, you know, that was awesome, me doing 75 circles. And they would even get me to kind of do a little demonstration before some competitions about like, and get the crowd to like count
right,
with
yeah,
them. So I guess that was kind of the earliest that I saw a huge amount of kind of support for everyone being like, this is crazy, this kid doing this amount of circles. And then that did translate over to pommel. I feel like I enjoy that positive reinforcement. If somebody says you're very good at this, then I'll like identify with being good at it and then want to push it more and more. And pommel horse, I think, was one of those things.
Where did you first train, Rhys? What was your first main club when you got into
So my
gymnastics?
very first gymnastics club was my local leisure centre. Our leisure centre is demolished now, but that was the first club I went to. And then after a while there in kind of a recreational well, how could I put it? Just like a
Facility.
facility. Yeah. They didn't go past recreational gymnastics. They then recommended I go to a club in a neighbouring town, and then the coach left from there, and then I went to a club in another town about 45 minutes away, and then I was with my coach as a younger gymnast, a guy called Vladimir Shugalov.
Okay.
And I think what was important about training with him for a long time, for I think like 6-7 years, from the age of 8 until I was 12 or 13, I trained with him. And I think the important part about him in my journey as a gymnast was he taught me how to love gymnastics.
Okay.
And I think looking back on that was very important for that time in my career. He would be the one that gives me the DVDs of the old school Russian gymnastics. He coached Nikolai Krukov.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So
wow.
that was one of them things where he was giving me DVDs of him like lifting Nikolai Krukov up under the rings when Krukov was like 12, 13, and then I'm watching his gymnastics. Wow. That's the kind of love that I was developing for the sport, and thankfully Vlad was facilitating that at that time. He then left the club that I was at and went to live with his wife in England, and I was left with no coach again. So then that's when Luke came into the picture, really.
And then, so that's such a cool story, because I love Krukov's gymnastics. How important do you think that is, Rhys, in the beginning, that it's not too intense and you do fall in love with the sport? Because you see a lot of kids, right, it gets very serious very quickly. Yeah. And I often feel like it's gonna get serious, so the longer you can push that back, the better for their development.
Yeah, I don't know if I know the answer to that. It's a tough one. I know that it definitely worked for me, having that period of, not being the best gymnast, having that kind of potential. But when I was with Vlad, I very much so knew that was the focus. He wanted me to enjoy gymnastics. And, there were serious days. There was days where we really pushed as well, of course. But I think the overarching theme of the training program was like gymnast led. What do you want to do? Oh, you want to do high bar dismounts? Yeah, let's do high bar dismounts. Let's scare yourself. Kind of understanding the foundations of gymnastics in that way. And then when I went to Luke, that's when the real training switched on.
Right, okay.
And it was needed, is my point as well. I'm not sure if it would have been better for me to have that training switch on earlier or maybe later. Like, you don't really know. And I guess that's kind of the beauty of an individual's journey in gymnastics. It's always different.
What was the setup in Ireland back then, when you were that age, when you're 12, 13, 14? What does the system look like back then?
Not great. There wasn't much of a system. At the time, it was not very well established, or it was getting established at that time. So I think that's the best way to put it. Is it was getting established at that time, and as we know, a system pretty much starting from scratch. I believe even Gymnastics Ireland were going through rebranding. They were, bringing in new people for the high performance system. So that was completely starting from scratch. It meant that Obviously you had to focus on younger gymnasts that weren't going to develop until later years. The gymnasts they did have, they were trying to, of course, facilitate them, but they were never going to be the next world champion or world medalist at that. So it was very much so in the process of working. From my experience, I feel like I was supported at that age as well, though. Even though there wasn't a very established system, I was identified as being a potential good gymnast.
Okay.
And I think even that's just that acknowledgement even was good enough for that time.
And when did you meet Luke? When did that relationship start, Rhys?
So that was 2014. I started working with Luke. So
how old were you at that point?
14.
14.
Yeah.
Did Luke move over to the UK? Did you meet him while he was in the UK? Or?
Yeah. So I would have trained alongside Luke at certain points. He was obviously in Huntingdon mostly full time. He would have come back for like Christmas holidays and stuff, and then trained in the gym that I was at that time. And then when he retired from gymnastics, he then straight away went into coaching, and he knew the situation with myself, and that situation was I had no coach. So he contacted my mum and was like, listen, understand the situation you're in. I'm going to this club that it was actually closer to where I lived at the time, so it was going to be a lot more easy for me to balance school and stuff. And he was like, come in, we'll have a chat. He wanted to chat with my parents first and just kind of feel everything out, and then we kind of went through a bit of like a testing period to see if we would just work together, and straight away we clicked. It was like within a month or two my gymnastics was becoming properly elite,
right?
And the progress was just so clear to myself and to my mum and dad that without any doubt Luke was going to be the person to take me on this journey.
When you spoke about like you needed to be working with Luke for it to be stepping up and getting a little bit serious, what did that shift look like?
So that went to, I know that Luke definitely learned a lot from Paul Hall.
Okay.
Obviously with Luke being in Huntingdon, he always said to me, he was never off the phone with Paul Hall. He would pick his brain about so many things, how to program, how to push me as a gymnast, how to almost maneuver around me, even just going through puberty and going through that difficult school age as a younger kid. Paul Hall really, really helped Luke. I think that's important to say, and Luke would never shy away from saying that either. I think that's kind of the beauty of gymnastics in a way, that you can go to a coach that is coaching a completely different country, that obviously Luke had a connection with Paul because Paul was training Luke, but Paul must have seen something in Luke too in terms of his ambition and what he wanted to do. So in terms of my training, it was 6 apparatus. We didn't specialise at a younger age. I feel like a lot of people think I did do that because they didn't see too much of my all-around career. But there was an all-around career there, and I'd say it was pretty intense. It was that kind of 3 routines across 6 apparatus, 2 cold pommel routines at the end of the session. Those were like the really intense training blocks that Luke would have put me through as a younger gymnast.
And are you in a group at that point, Rhys?
No,
just you.
It was just me at the time, but there was younger kids, like much younger kids, 8, 9, 10-year-olds. Obviously I was like 14, 15 at the time of this training block, so I was very much so out on my own doing this. But there's positives and negatives to that at the same time.
What were they, Rhys? Because obviously, we spoke a little bit this morning about how important it has been for Irish gymnastics to have somebody based in Ireland, winning medals from Ireland. What are the challenges of being so isolated, particularly back then when you're a lot younger and you're training by yourself, as opposed to being in the UK where there's maybe 20 guys that are as good as you in the country that you can work with on a regular basis?
Yeah, it's an interesting one because there's, like I said, there's positives and negatives to it. I went over to England a good few times, to Birmingham, to Huntingdon, and kind of saw how people trained in groups and related it to how I train individually, of course. I feel like in general, I probably work harder as an individual. I feel like being in a group or would have always I don't know, just slowed me down in many aspects. Um, I found this interesting, just kind of observing it. I went to Huntingdon for a training camp one time, and a couple of my skills, like I would have done Healy on P-bars and Ginger on bar at that time. And I remember the other boys being like, you just do Ginger on bar without like a mat? I'm like, yeah. Well, why? And they're like, we'd be terrified of that. And they were kind of all collectively saying that. And I guess that kind of almost showed to me one of the negative sides about training in a group is like kind of stigmas around gymnastics, where, you know, even doing like a Healy on P-bars is like, if all the other boys have a mat in doing a Healy on P-bars, then, well, of course I'm going to do that then. But if you're by yourself and your coach is just like, yeah, just take the mat out, you're like, all right, coach, no problem. You just kind of trust your coach that bit more. Whereas if there was training partners to lean on and kind of push back to the coach a little bit more, I feel like that was a clear negative side. And I almost you speak a lot about naivety on this podcast, I know, but I feel like in that case naivety would help you a lot, because you're isolated.
Yeah.
It's your coach kind of guiding you, and your naivety is actually helping you more than you think.
Yeah, well, a lot of the time we would see guys would come to train at the gym, at our gym in Nottingham, that don't have a foam pit, and they're wild.
Yeah.
'Cause they've got no fear. And so as soon as they've got a pit, they're like, well, I can try anything. And I'm going, whoa. They've got no like reference point of what's dangerous, because they're so not used to a foam pit. And like, that's a massive advantage. It's really interesting that you talk about that collective thinking, because that's so true. Like, if you're in a group of boys and everybody's just decided that like, that's crazy to do that, we're not going to do that. Like, you always have a mat in for this skill. Like, why would you not have a mat out? Then you just go along with the norm of the group, wouldn't you?
Sure, yeah, for sure. That was just something that I picked up there, and even in other clubs I've been to, I would even notice that like a group of junior squad boys would like spend 25 minutes warming up or stretching, and I'd be like, you know, do we not need to like get going? Like, normally like Luke only allows me 10 minutes to stretch here, and then I have to get stuck into conditioning. Whereas if there was a group of boys that obviously they prioritise just like chilling out, stretching out, like, you know, I feel like that now. Yeah. But when you're a junior, I feel like it's important to just get going, start your session, get as much of your session squeezed into that time, very limited time you have outside of school as well.
Did you find it hard to adapt to the intensity of like working one-to-one with Luke when he came back from Huntingdon and maybe is talking and communicating with Paul all the time and figuring out how to program, and at times probably making mistakes as well along the way? Because I remember going back from Huntingdon to Loughborough to work with Sergey again for the first time for like a couple of years, and I was so tired all of the time. Like, every lunch I'd just go behind this corner and fall asleep for like 2.5 and Sergey would leave me for like 2.5 hours.
Really?
And I'd wake up and I'm like, sir, why did you leave me? Because you're going to make me do the whole of the session now, but I'm not going to finish till 7 o'clock.
That's so true. I think what made it easier was Luke was never afraid to say when he'd messed up. Even when, say, a competition didn't go to plan and we're doing that post-competition debrief, he would always kind of sit down and we'd brainstorm together what could we have done different. And I think the we in that is important, because it's not only like, what could I have done as a gymnast? Could I have worked harder? Could I have done this better in the competition? It's also Luke reflecting and hearing my feedback. Like, as a 15-year-old, me giving feedback to the coach, like, yeah, well, maybe this might not work in the routine, and we're discussing this. And that was always the case, no matter what my age was. That was always the case, that I never felt that fear to tell Luke what I think could be done better from his point of view, but then vice versa as well.
Do you feel like it was an advantage, Rhys, with you both being isolated and working together and in Ireland and trying to produce from Ireland, in being able to almost be like us against everybody else? Like, was that helpful in some ways to kind of, I guess, galvanize you around this common goal of like, we're trying to do something really special here? And Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It always is, right, to be the first to do something is always very, very special.
Do you mean like us against everyone else, as in everyone else in the world?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's, I mean, that's ultimately the sport, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's ultimately you going up
But
against...
you know, you're competing against potentially lads in Britain or Japan or America who've got like the best of everything. And maybe when you started, you didn't have that. And sometimes it's great to be feeling like, I'm going up against these guys. I remember when we first started out doing quite well as Great Britain and we'd go and compete against Russia, it was always like, it felt incredible to beat countries like Russia or China.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah,
it's like an underdog type mentality.
I guess so. Definitely myself and Luke had to be outliers in terms of any kind of standard that was initially set in Ireland before. Very early on. It was kind of around that time that I placed behind Max and Lewis on the podium at British, and then that's when we were like, you know, we're 9/10 off what these guys are scoring. That's completely possible. So I think that was, I know, definitely a shift for myself. And I also know that Luke was saying that I could be the best in the world the day I started working with him. So maybe he had that ambition a little bit earlier, but for me, that moment at the British Championships in 2016, that was a moment where I was like, oh, I actually could do this. I actually could beat the number 1 and number 2 in the world who were standing ahead of me in the podium, which was a powerful thing to have. It was one of those moments where I felt like I could really make it in the sport, and it only pushed me more. So I guess it in terms of that, there was nobody else other than Luke really telling me, like, you know, you could go and win world championships, you could go and win Olympic Games. It was always us having to not prove ourselves, but just do it.
Yeah.
Like, actually put the work in and figure out the puzzle of that is a pommel horse routine, and see how we could beat everybody else that is in contention for that world title.
When you started working with Luke, Rhys, what kind of things did he bring to the table from Huntingdon in terms of, like, what had he learned from watching Lewis and Dan Keating's preparing and competing at the highest level?
A big thing was competing under pressure, the kind of whole ethos of how you view a competition, how you prepare for it. Lewis talked about it on your podcast, about that autopilot switch, where he said that, you know, you've done the hundreds of numbers in training and you earn the right to press that autopilot switch when it comes to competing. And that's exactly it. It very early on, Luke showed me that, well, he took me through the paces of that 5 routines per day as a junior gymnast, made them automatic, you know, no warm-up, jump up, do a routine. If you do it, then of course you can do it on a competition day. And even though, you know, take that British Championships in 2016, for example, again, it was the first live TV competition I'd been on. It was a very pressured situation. Ironic how in 2022 it was in that same stadium I won my first world title, but pretty cool to think of that. But it was the same kind of setup. It was an arena full of people, and at 15 years old, then that's when I performed that routine. I hit that autopilot switch, and then the more times you do that, the more I trusted Luke's programming. So obviously at the very start, you're like, a 5th routine, like a cold routine, he's not letting me warm up, like, this is terrible, like, this is so difficult, balancing that with all round as well. But the more times you succeed in a competition from that program, the more times you trust it. So that trust just built and built more and more until, you know, I'm definitely one of the most consistent pommel horse workers that you can not always, because it's pommel horse, but
yeah.
you can count on a lot of the times just to hit a routine, just go through. And I always liked being that gymnast as well.
Do you think that is the numbers, just the numbers that you're doing? Like, is there any way around that, or do you just, as a pommel horse worker, you kind of have to just do the numbers?
Yeah, it's the tough answer for a lot of people to hear when they ask, how can I improve my circle shape? How can I get consistent on pommel? And I just have to give the boring answer of do loads of numbers, do loads of routines, do loads of that one skill you're struggling on, just get it automatic. Because people are so guilty of it throughout gymnastics, and I see it all the time where they just push that little one skill that they're always struggling on to the side, and then they want a miracle to happen when it comes to a competition. They want that adrenaline to take them through a pommel horse skill, or to like swing them up into that sheer handstand. It's like, absolutely not. You want to be able to do that with your eyes closed, with zero energy in your body, and I feel like those are where the like fatigued pommel routines come into play, because you learn how to do each of your skills under a huge amount of fatigue in the worst shape possible, but you still get it done. And yeah, people hate to hear that answer of just do more numbers.
After 2016, Rhys, you then build into starting your senior career in 2018. Just tell me a little bit about, potentially we've spoke about before, right? That advantage of almost being on the come up and not having too much expectation because you've not done anything yet. What do you remember about that time, and almost do you remember being very fearless in those years in the beginning?
No, I don't remember being fearless. I remember being very ambitious, very confident. I still am, and I was never scared to say what I wanted to achieve in the sport, and I feel like that was really important for me to say it out loud. I feel like it was important, first of all, to kind of show my intentions. It wasn't so much me going up against everybody else in the world and saying I want to beat everyone else in the world. It was more me finally saying, as an Irish gymnast, like, no guys, I don't think you understand. I'm not just here to participate. Like, I'm not just going to be another World Championships participant. I don't want to just qualify to the Olympic Games. Like, I want to actually take home medals. It always felt like I was, for my own country, for Ireland, I had to always say, like, no guys, I'm wanting to do more than what has been done before me here. And I feel like that's why I was always very vocal with what I wanted to achieve and how I wanted to achieve it. So yeah.
Yeah, do you think that was important, given that Ireland hadn't had that success? Then you almost needed to be very outspoken about it.
I don't know if it was needed, but I certainly wanted to be like that. I feel like in sport in general in Ireland, very little people spoke like that. But now I'm seeing the tide change quite a lot, where I'm going to speaking events with other Olympians, and they're like, yeah, I'd love to walk away with an Olympic medal at the next Games, and yeah, every competition I go to, I'm wanting to win it.
Yeah.
That like wouldn't have happened 8 years ago, and I saw it firsthand. I would sit in as a young gymnast on these panels and watch these Olympians talk, and it would be uninspiring almost, because it would be an excuse or like a sad story about their Olympic Games. It would never be a story of hope and promise and ambition for the next one. And I feel like from hearing those stories, and you know, that of course there's athletes across the world that speak ambitiously, but I certainly drew much more from those athletes than I did anybody else with a sad story.
And then the actual competition side of things, did you identify execution as being almost like a super strength for you and like a strategy quite early on that would separate you apart from maybe some of the other pommel horse workers?
I did, and that really happened after my shoulder surgery in 2018, late 2018. Of course, I had success in 2018 with the Commonwealth Games, European Championships, and then the shoulder surgery happened, and then we kind of just had to start from scratch. And again, just a testament to Luke's positive attitude as a coach, and then mine as a gymnast. We recognized the situation that we were in. We knew that we would be starting with, you know, like most 6-year-olds would start on pommel with their feet in a bucket on a mushroom doing circles time and time again. We're starting from the very fundamentals, and we took that opportunity and we're like, why not, let's just do a perfect circle. Let's just start circling with that arched extended circle. And there was to be no compromise with that. We just decided we're sticking to it. No matter how hard this is, we're going to stick to this. And it made it so much more difficult. Doing an extended circle and pommel is so much more difficult than piking it in and playing it safe like I had done up until that point. Because I know I can do all of the skills. Now let's absolutely perfect them. And we kept at it. We done a couple of competitions before World Championships, and then we kind of showcased that really nice execution score at World Championships, and thankfully it was rewarded. We were getting into the 9 execution score, and that was for the first time in a very long time people were seeing that, so it was really cool for it to pay off in those moments.
I remember that time, and I remember you've messaged me before when we spoke about this on the podcast, and I said I can remember around that time when Rhys was trying to really improve his execution, and he wasn't directly calling other gymnasts out, but it was almost like an indirect shot at gymnasts that weren't necessarily doing the most beautifully executed gymnastics around that time. Was that like something that you were purposely doing to try and almost convince the judges to reward execution a little bit more?
I think
it felt like from the outside watching, I was going, well, I know who he's talking about right there, even though he's not directly saying that
Go
person.
on.
Yeah. Your main competitor at the time, Max.
Yeah.
Yeah. It felt like, as someone that knows the sport, I was going, well, I know what he's doing. He's not directly, he's indirectly trying to point towards the differences between their style of gymnastics.
Well, yeah, what I was showing was the rules of gymnastics laid out in an example. And I think that was really important for me to do. I feel like it did make an impact. And the rules of pommel was, if your circle was not in a straight line, if there was any deviation of your hips, there was a 0.1 deduction on each circle. And that wasn't being taken across the board. Like, Max aside, I don't want to go in on Max.
Yeah.
But across the board, it should have been... judges should have been writing for each circle 1, 1, 1, 3, 1, 3.
Yeah.
It should have been like that, but it wasn't at all. And I feel like I needed to highlight that, but it wasn't the only motivation either. It was me fulfilling my potential, and my potential was to do perfect circles and push through that palm routine in the most beautiful way and try and get that really nice execution score. I remember like landing after that pommel routine at Worlds and kind of thinking like, oh, I hope they give that a good E score. Like that was so my goal going into that competition, was the E score, because I knew the difficulty was there. Like, you can't change the difficulty. I knew what we were going for, but what we were really going for was that execution of the routine and of the circle shape. And I feel like we did it. I know that there's been changes in the rules since then around circle shape, around skewing. That's just gymnastics. The rules are always evolving, but at that time in that Olympic cycle, I feel like the deductions weren't being taken for that as accurately as they should be.
What was it like winning your first world medal?
It was very special. Bittersweet in a way. I say definitely more sweet, especially in hindsight, because it was my ticket to my first Olympic Games. It was my first world medal, Ireland's first ever gymnastics world medal ever. So it was very special in that aspect. But you know it's bittersweet when the whole after party people are saying you should have won. You're almost like, I don't want to hear it. You know, it's a tough one for everybody who's coming up to you saying you should have won. That was the wrong result. Obviously, social media is blowing up, but I don't even take that into account. And yeah, you know, the question was asked to me, that was a crazy final. What did you think of the scoring? And I said that it was the right score for me, and I still stand by that.
Yeah. It was just an interesting... I look back at that time as a really interesting time. And I remember around 2018 was the first time I was getting into the UFC. And obviously Conor McGregor was like popping off and going mad. And at times I was kind of looking, going... Because I was matching up almost, I'm going to tell people what I want to achieve. And then the like indirect shots at Max as execution.
Oh, they were pretty direct, though.
Well, yeah. But you weren't necessarily calling his name out, right? Like,
well, I mean, I wanted it to be that kind of rivalry. I think
Yeah.
it just makes the sport exciting.
I enjoyed it. I loved
Yeah.
it. It was very entertaining, right? But
Yeah.
I did think like gymnastics is a different sport, and then
Completely
you still just
agree.
have to get up there and do your routine.
Yeah.
So you can say what you want, but once you put your hand up, then it doesn't really matter, does it? Whereas I guess if you're fighting against someone else,
Well, yeah,
then
you're
that
fighting. You're trying to ruin somebody's day
Yeah,
then when
yeah.
you're fighting them. But
Yeah.
I never really gave it that comparison with the likes of UFC or boxing. It was always kind of my mission to try and create
Yeah.
somewhat of a story around gymnastics, around a story that was happening though. It wasn't like
Oh,
me
no,
creating
you
a
weren't-
fictional
yeah,
story.
you weren't fabricating it, and you were trying to do this. And I think it was what you were trying to do in terms of your execution was amazing. It was just as a gymnastics fan, it's just an interesting thing to observe.
Yeah,
from
yeah.
The outside, like
Agree.
you can kind of like see how that's playing, and then you watch how that plays out in the competitions that then unfold. What did you do then in between 2019, where you get the first medal for Ireland, you qualify for the Olympic Games, you have all those people coming up to you saying that you should have won, and you have that frustration of, well, hopefully the judges give me that score next time then. What did you do in between that space and then Tokyo to try and then make up the difference of turning that world medal to an Olympic medal and then potentially a gold one?
Just consolidate. Obviously it was a messy build up to Tokyo because of COVID. There's a lot of things happening, but the build up to Tokyo, I have to say, it was so good. It was so good. Some of the routines.
The first time, Rhys, or when it was rescheduled?
Oh no! When it was rescheduled,
Okay.
because I wasn't even in build up time when it got rescheduled. It was like, when was it that the whole world went into lockdown?
March, April.
March, yeah. That's when we all found out games are being delayed. Okay, let's pack up our stuff, go home. So honestly, not too much. It was more just like consolidating the routine, making it more perfect. Making sure I get like the E handstand dismount. I'd done the D handstand dismount at 2019. So just really pushing those little things. We knew that there wasn't going to be any mega upgrades. And we knew that we could potentially win with that. I think at the time it was 6-5 start. But yeah, it just didn't. I mean, it pulled off in the qualifications perfectly. Qualified in first, and then just the mistake in the final.
And what do you, when you look back now in hindsight, did you change much from that build up to that Olympic Games and how you performed that routine to 4 years later? Do you look back now and go, actually, there were some things that I did differently in those next 4 years? Or do you look back and go, it's just one of those things, like pommel horse is pommel horse, and that was my best at that time?
Well, my mindset changed definitely. It's it very much so came back to like a self-centered approach to the competition build up,
Rather than like, was there a switch in mindset after that Games, Rhys, where you were just almost competing against yourself instead of everybody else?
Yeah, most certainly.
Because when I've competed against those athletes, I've kind of been, oh, you're not even playing the same game as everybody else. Like,
Yeah.
I can't compete with you.
No, I completely agree. And that was the case. But at the same time, so it was the case for that Tokyo Olympic cycle, where I was comparing myself and watching other competitors, learning from other competitors too. And it's valuable, it is. There's certain times where that is super valuable. And early on in my senior career, I feel like I took a huge amount from that. But at the same time, after Tokyo, then that's when it went to the self-centered approach. That's when I started to go to competitions and not watch anybody at all on pommel, because I'm sure you get this yourself. As soon as you just watch gymnastics, you start analysing it. You start like feeling out like, oh, that's an interesting technique on their Stockley. Like, look at the way they lean there. Whereas you're competing the next day. So why are you like analysing a technique that you're not even going to use for your next day? And that's when I came to that realisation. I'd be the guy sitting with my back to the pommel, even in the training hall, not watching anybody. And I think it obviously paid dividends, because it was 22, 23, and then 24 world titles and Olympic win.
How do you sit down and plan for an Olympic Games that's 4 years away after an Olympic final like the one in Tokyo, Rhys? Like, what are you and Rhys doing? What does that look like? Are you sitting down pretty early going, right, the plan is Olympic gold medal here in 4 years' time. Let's back engineer a plan backwards from that over the 4 years?
Yeah, and the plan doesn't go perfectly either. We do start planning as soon as it finishes up. We made like a switch of the routine to like not having a Magyar Shavado into it and just doing like Russian travels, and then that just wasn't quite working out, the construction of it. So then we were reverting back to the old technique, the old construction. And so I guess it's not being fearful of that, kind of weighing up the risk and reward of it all constantly, trialing and testing it at the likes of the World Cups. And you know, it's funny because people would always come up to me only on like the bad World Cups, the ones that I've like fallen off or have made mistakes on, and they'd always be like, they'd always have something to critique about it when the World Cup doesn't go well. They'd always say like, you know, why are you going for like a 6-5 difficulty when you're just qualifying? Like, it's only qualifications, and like obviously you fail, and what's the point in that? And my answer would always be, well, it's like, I'm not just trying to win this World Cup, I'm trying to win Worlds, I'm trying to win Olympics. Like, this is part of the process. So it's and people just didn't understand that. So it was a lot of trial and error through those World Cup series, and it's great to be able to do that each and every year. But it would always have to come down to the right fit of a routine or of a skill when it comes to World Championships or European Championships even.
Is it a real big advantage, Rhys, being able to go to all of those World Cups, or being in a country maybe where there's not so many successful athletes that you could pick? You could almost go to every World Cup if you want, because that's where you learn to compete and you can try things out.
Yeah, it's true, but then, you know, it's like...
I'm not downgrading the fact that you've earned the position to be able to go
exactly,
and do those World
but
Cups.
it is. For me, anyway, I know a lot of people that wouldn't like to do the World Cups. Mac's never done the World Cups very much, if I recall.
No.
So it obviously didn't suit him. It didn't affect him negatively either, it seems. But I'm very grateful that I'm able to get that chance to do those World Cups too.
Yeah, and you felt like they were an opportunity for you in a year. Let's say you're going to start competing after you finish the show this weekend, and there's, you know, you look at the plan and you go, right, I've got 5 or 6 World Cups this year, and you would use them as like target competitions to try different things out. And
yeah, we would definitely do that. Just even going through the steps of doing a qualification and then a finals, it's so valuable. And then competing against the best in the world as well. There's the best in the world are at those World Cups, so why wouldn't you kind of do that, stress test it? And I think especially for a younger gymnast, those World Cups are super important, because you are being surrounded by like the people you watched on TV all those times, and then all of a sudden they're standing beside you waiting to go on pommel. So early on in my career, I took a huge amount of value from every one of those World Cups.
what pommel horse work has inspired you when you were growing up, Rhys, and you were first getting onto the scene and competing at a high level?
So, I'll pick 2 gymnasts for 2 different reasons. The first being Xiao, for obvious reasons. His circle shape was beautiful. His style was beautiful. His dominance was amazing in pommel horse in general. I believe he won 2005, 2006, 2007, and then 2008 Olympics. So 4 back-to-back, that's absolutely incredible, and I had really admired that about him. Obviously, in that the famous routine is from 2017 Worlds, isn't it, in Germany, in Stuttgart, where the commentators are like, oh, everybody could just go home. Like, that's it done, that's the competition done. So I wanted to be as dominant as him. Yeah, I learned a huge amount from his technique on pommel. The second gymnast is Lewis Smith, for sure. And the reason being slightly different from Xiao, but it kind of comes down to that one moment, and that moment was 2012 Olympics. So I went over to watch the opening ceremony of the 2012 Olympics, and when I was over there, I just kind of got to see how big the Olympics was, first of all, in a city, but then also see how much pressure was on Lewis. And you're in Trafalgar Square, there's a giant poster of him, of like, I don't know, like an Adidas advert. He's on people's t-shirts. When it came down to it, he was one of the faces of that Olympic Games, which was so powerful, and I could just see that when I was out there. And then I remember just sitting at home very vividly watching him at the pommel final, and before he was going, the crowd going crazy. You were there in the stadium, the royal family sitting watching him. I'm just like, this guy has got the weight of the world on his shoulders. This is crazy. I was only 12 at the time, but even then I could just understand this is insane for one person to experience this much pressure. And there he goes, up in the handstand, work his way through the routine, dismounts. It's done. He just done the most insanely good routine of his life in that moment when it mattered most, under such pressure. And I will never forget the admiration that I felt for Lewis at that time. Obviously, he didn't quite top the podium, but it didn't matter to me because I knew the backstory of that. I obviously didn't know it all. It was probably a lot more intense for Lewis, but I knew a little bit of how mad that must have been for his brain, and for him to just do a routine, hit that autopilot switch, just amazing.
Have you felt experiences like that yourself?
Yeah, Paris was probably one of those experiences where, it's for me, it's just the perfect story of my career, where I know that I could do absolutely nothing the rest of my career, and I'll still look back on that and be like, how the hell did I do that? Where I needed to do it. Everybody had the expectations. I'd won the 2 worlds prior to that. No Irish gymnast has ever won an Olympic medal before, and this was the time that I'd bring home our first gymnastics medal for Ireland, and I did it. So it was one side of me is like, how the hell did I do that? Another side of me is saying, of course I did that. I've done it every single day on the lead up to that competition. How
did you handle that pressure in the build up, Rhys? Like that weight of expectation, and everybody asking you, are you going to win? You're going to win. You're going to, it's never ending, isn't it? I imagine in Ireland, here during that time, you probably couldn't go anywhere without somebody at least recognizing you. Is he that gymnast guy? Like I'm sure that was a lot. How did you go about managing those expectations and just keeping yourself very level-headed?
I think you gotta just compartmentalize it. Understand that the people kind of stopping you in the streets don't know the whole story. Obviously, like my teammates and coaches wouldn't have ever said something like that. But if people would stop me in the street and be like, "Here, don't fall," I'm like, "Will do. I'll try my best." You know what I mean? So it's like, what can you do with that? So it's a weird pressure, because on the lead up to the Olympics, and when you're one of the hopefuls to come back with a medal, everyone they're just expecting you. They're like, sure, you'll do it, no problem. And in your brain, you're kind of like working it all out. Like, well, they don't even know about the Kazakhstan guy, or like the American guy, or like this Japanese guy's insane. They don't know anything about that, but they're just like, you've got it, you're gonna win. So it makes the compliments not so important, and it also makes the don't falls or the negative comments not so important either. So it kind of makes it null. But you like I say, compartmentalize that stuff, the external stuff, and you always just come back to yourself. And as long as your mind is okay and you're in the right headspace when it comes down to training every day, competing in that final, then it'll be the same as training. It'll be the same as the competitions before that too.
Do you feel like when you were preparing for that Olympics and you were getting ready for Paris and you were competing in Paris, you were just at a different level? What do you think separated you from the other 7 men in that final in Paris?
How prepared I was. I don't think anybody could possibly take that competition and each training session on the lead up to it as seriously as I took it. you had Kenzie on the podcast, and she was there for multiple sessions, and I thought that was interesting because she got to sit back and observe, and she did mention it in your podcast that, you know, like people were just kind of jumping up, doing a handstand dismount. If their hand slips, oh well, they roll off. Everything I done in that session was methodical. There wasn't one thing that didn't have a purpose, that wasn't well thought out from myself and Luke and discussed at length of how it could contribute to the best pommel horse routine. And it wasn't to the point of being, you know, it wasn't to the point of being superstitious, like I need to do these exercises in order to perform, or, you know, wear my kit in a certain way or twist my wrist guards like that. It was all for a reason. It was all to warm up certain muscles. It was all to feel a certain way before I done that pommel routine.
Yeah, I found it really interesting today in the gym, Rhys, and we had a chat about that. Just seeing the types of like body movement work that you were doing, and you know, I was an all-rounder, but I spent time around a lot of specialists. But I guess that's the kind of level that you get to when you specialize on something and you're trying to be the very best at one apparatus. And we spoke about it a bit before. I think it'd be really interesting for people to hear, like, where did that come from, and what are you trying to train when you are trying to, you know, you were talking about getting that extra length, like those extra 2 inches that helps you stretch your circle out.
Yeah, I guess if you kind of pinpointed any skill throughout my routine, any kind of circle, whether that be an inward loop, outward loop, one handle, I would always be able to tell you what I'm trying to achieve in that. There's not one circle in that entire pommel routine, say, that I performed at the Olympics in Paris, that I wouldn't be able to explain to you why I'm doing it in a certain way. And that's just how minute the details come down to, especially when you're a specialist. It is so different being a specialist to an all-rounder. The all-rounder, you don't have the time, you don't have the brain capacity, you just don't. It's not there. Things need to be a bit more automatic with an all-rounder because there is so much going on. But as a specialist, you've got 10 skills in that routine. Well, 8 now. 8 now, but you can really just hone in your focus on each and every movement to the very smallest of details. So like you were explaining there, for example, I was just kind of showing you in the gym today about why I do these like shoulder shrug exercises on P-bars, and why I pin my shoulders back, I lower into the lowest position possible and push into the tallest position possible. And to me, that is me making a mind to muscle engagement as well as strengthening the muscles around my shoulder to then translate it onto pommel. And there's nothing I do in my conditioning that doesn't have a purpose. I'm not doing it to, you know, get bigger muscles. I'm not doing it to feel a certain way. They're all directly correlated with a specific skill or technique on pommel.
When you're doing a routine like the routine that you did in Paris, Rhys, like, do you have audio cues in your head that you're like thinking about hitting every time, and do you like attach those to the feeling of the skill?
Yeah, that's a great question, because when you're in training, your cues are different to what they're like in competition, for me anyway. So in training, I would maybe be thinking of like 3. I tend to like max out at 3 cues that I'm wanting to hit on each skill, and you know, sometimes I miss those cues, and then I can obviously fall off and revisit it and get back up. But when it comes to competition, you kind of have to have cues that are going to keep you focused on your pommel work and going to take you from like one skill to the next in the best way possible. Like you obviously, I said about the autopilot switch, you obviously don't want to autopilot the whole routine, because, you know, if something does slightly go off, you want to be ready to adjust. And that happened in Paris, actually. I took one extra side loop before my handstand dismount, and I think that's how I knew I was really in it. I was really, really focused on that routine. But going back to what you're saying about the cues, I would have cues at certain sections of the routine, like, you know, make sure you hit that front support, push tall, speed up the circle. That's when the tempo would increase on the mag or Shavato maybe. I think those are needed in a routine like that.
When you're training that routine and you're preparing for it over a long period of time, And I was following your vlogs on YouTube, and you were talking a lot about doing part routines and trying to get them as perfect as possible, like 0 deductions. Were there any parts or even a routine you remember doing in training in the build-up to Paris that you think was the closest to perfect you ever got?
Yeah, like the half routines. There's especially the second half routines. So many of them, I don't think had any deductions in them. Like no deductions in them whatsoever, and I know the judges will find them, but from my understanding of the rules of gymnastics, there was no deductions in half routines, second half routines that I done. First half routines was a little bit more challenging because the likes of the sheer handstands and the flops, it's like, even with the rules of gymnastics and as doing it as perfectly as possible, there's always something you can find. So I would have got the half routines, like the first half routine I got down to 2/10. Second half routine got down to no deductions. So like the potential is there for to do like 2/10 off a pommel routine, even though that's not going to happen. The potential was there, but then you gotta get it as close to that perfection as you can.
Does a limiting factor almost become like fatigue, trying to do a whole routine perfectly?
Yeah, for sure. Well, that's why I'm kind of specifying with the second halves. When they're done individually, I can do them with no deductions, but yeah, that little bit of fatigue, that's when your body starts to move a bit more. You're not swinging as sharp, you're not swinging as fast. It's definitely a factor.
In Paris, it seemed like there were quite a few like new pommel specialists or guys like coming around. Is there anybody at the minute that you look at and you go, wow, their gymnastics is really cool? They might be a problem, not a problem, but they might be someone I'm going to have to like contend with over the next few years.
I like that guy Brandon Dang from the United States.
Yep.
He just won the Baku World Cup. I really like his work. It's really nice. I messaged him and just complimented him on his nice routine. It's really cool. I like what I like seeing? I like seeing really solid, consistent work. Almost gymnastics I trust. That really impresses me, because we all know that if you see this crazy routine, you're like, that was wild, scored really high, wow. But then, like, are they going to be able to do that at the next couple of competitions just like that? I feel like that with Tang Chi Hung on high bar.
Yeah.
You know the way he can just, he's doing the most insane routine, but you're like, everything just looks solid. Like that, what is it, Volstrom?
Yep.
A Volstrom shouldn't look solid.
Yeah,
like he's doing it. That's insane. Or the way he catches this casino, always stretched, but he always catches it consistently. There's things like this that's what really impresses me. Not about somebody hitting like the routine of their life, but it's like, oh, they can do that again and again and again.
Yeah, I love his high bar routine. I was so impressed because for a while he would just do the same type of skills, right? He was just doing catch-ups. And when he started putting casinos in, I was like, wow. In fact, the level of high bar around the world is so much higher now.
Yeah, it's brilliant.
Like, it's pretty incredible. I remember watching it was the Japanese championships in like the autumn time. And the high bar final was just outrageous. Yeah. It was just unbelievable.
Yeah, it was. I mean, it was obviously a higher standard than Paris, but it is outrageous. I love to see that. I really do.
What's your favourite apparatus to watch other than pommel horse?
Probably floor.
Okay.
Yeah. I feel it's very exciting to me watching floor, and there's some great floor workers, man, as well. It's a really cool time to be a gymnastics fan.
And is pommel your favourite apparatus to train?
Yeah.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
It is.
High bar was like my best event, but floor was my favourite apparatus to train.
To train, really?
Yeah,
Wow.
Yeah.
Why was that?
I just loved it. Since I was a kid, all I wanted to do was like just do tumbles and combinations and stuff. Then when I injured my ankle in Glasgow, I just could never really do it.
Yeah, okay.
But I loved fast track because it took away it didn't matter. I could still kind of tumble like I could before.
I've been watching your double pike Arabian.
Okay.
Trying to get that in on floor, and I've been watching your whip double pike Arabian. My God,
yeah,
that was a beautiful skill you done.
Yeah, I did. I really liked doing that, and we were preparing whip triple back for that Worlds in Nanning. So we would do. There's a video of me somewhere on Instagram on track.
You need to send me that. Yeah. You need to post that for everyone to see.
But the idea was that we'd qualify with whip double pike Arabian. We use that to qualify. for nannying at, like after Glasgow, but we'd get whipped triple back ready, and I think that floor routine was going to be like a 7-1 then.
Did you ever do triple back on floor?
No, I never did one on floor. No, because we just didn't have time to. It was like we were ready to go. We were like, right, this is what we're gonna do for this Worlds. It was pretty cool that time. That's the time that I feel like I was at my like physical peak.
Yeah.
Because I remember doing like front rise double pike on P-bars. I remember even doing a triple back off P-bars to level mats. Like just doing outrageous stuff, and it was so fun. So I was just exploring what can we do, and obviously with Sergey, like that just gets out of control. Because like
I know I've worked with Sergey since I've been doing Dancing with the Stars in Dublin. I've worked with Sergey the past few months. And I've been taking things slow because it just came off the back of like a month break. Yeah. And then I've been coming in like Sergey just gets so excited. Yeah, I love it though. Yeah. I absolutely love it because it's so nice to be around you. You show him like a glimmer of like a skill. He's like, maybe like upgrade this already. I'm like, I would love to, Sergey, but I'm scared I'm going to hurt myself.
Yeah, it was. I mean, some of the skills he asked me, God. I'd be like, sir, I'll tell you a story about, I broke my leg when I was a kid, because I said, sir, could I do Markelov with a full twist, like Wallstrom?
Yeah.
And he was like, yeah, of course you can do that. But he meant in his head, like, when I'm older.
Yeah.
And so I just got up on the bar and tried it, and just went straight onto the bar and broke my leg by just hitting my leg on the bar, yeah. And he was like, what are you doing? I was like, I thought you told me to do it. And it was just like a miscommunication between the two of us. So me and him together was like not a great combination at times. But he would get so excited. I remember like we went to America to do to the international gymnastics camp.
Yeah.
And I went out to coach for a week with Andy. And at the end of the week, they do like a showcase for all the kids. And I was like, sir, put the pad in, like, and if I like catch the Kovac, I'll do a dismount. And I did a Kovac. I was like, I'm doing a Kachev, so I did a Kachev. I did another one. And I said, okay, put the pad in. And I did a top change and wound up and did a quad back. But when I let go, I like grabbed my legs underneath.
Yeah.
And as I grabbed my legs, I realized I fucked it because then I can't pull in anymore. Because that was as far as I could pull in, I just had to hold on. And I just did a quad back straight to my face. It was brilliant though.
You actually made it round?
Yeah, I made it round to like all fours on my face like that. But I miss those days with like, with Sergey, just experimenting, exploring in the gym. Because I would train with him one-on-one a lot as well. Like, and it was cool, man. Like I miss those days. Anybody that's still competing as an athlete, I always say like, just make the most of it. Like it's incredible. Like, yeah, it's a very special thing to be able to do.
Yeah, I don't take it for granted either. I think out of everything, like post Olympics, of course, it's like a big change in my mentality because you've done it, you've done the pinnacle of your sports. That's what you work towards. So you kind of explore a lot of different thoughts from the time it happens until now over the past 6 months especially, and you kind of start asking yourself like were you actually doing it for that Olympic medal? And the answer is that I was really doing it for the enjoyment of the sport, and just that's what drives me every day. That's what drives me when I was younger. I loved learning skills. I loved gymnastics. I still love gymnastics. My favorite part of a competition is being in a big gymnastics hall surrounded by the best in the world, just watching and seeing everybody doing this amazing sport. And I think that has always been the driving force, and sometimes it can be fogged by the likes of I'm doing it to win this medal, but it's actually not the case. It can be one of the motivations, but I feel like generally it's because I love gymnastics.
Yeah, that's brilliant, mate, because I remember sitting in a room a little bit like this one with a therapist, and she said, what's your biggest fear? And I said, my biggest fear is that I'm going to go to another Olympic Games, I'm going to win another medal, and I'm going to be just as depressed as I am right now. She was like, well, you need to change like your goal and your targets and the way that you shape your life then. And then actually at the end of my career, I just loved gymnastics so much. All of that stuff didn't matter to me, do you know what I mean? So it's great that you say that you're like, I think it's good for people to hear from you, somebody that's won an Olympic gold medal, saying, actually, they might say, well, that's easy for him to say.
It is. But at the same time, it's a great thing to realize in hindsight too, because even if I don't know, if I had heard me say that and I didn't have an Olympic medal, I'd maybe just be like, oh well, maybe that's just like a defense for not winning an Olympic gold medal or whatever. But I trust myself in saying that because I've done it, and it is a beautiful thing to be able to realize that's actually what's been driving you throughout all these years. But it's that was an interesting thing you said there. Because you know, not only does it maybe highlight what you were doing right after a big victory like winning an Olympic medal that we've both done, it can highlight a lot of things that you were doing wrong, that that was obviously one of those things that you realized in hindsight. You were like, oh, I was doing that for a completely wrong reason. Yeah,
I mean, around that time I remember having a very difficult conversation with Sergey and basically just saying to him, like, I got this very wrong. We got this very wrong. Like, the approach was very wrong.
In what way?
Just in that, I think it was because it was just the medal and that I'd fixated on. I think my whole value to me in my head was measured off whether or not I was going to be an Olympic champion. And it had been that way since I was a child. So I just set myself up to fail. Yeah. And to be probably quite miserable, So I think it was that conversation I had with him. And he got quite upset, he got very upset about it. But he was like, no, this is a good conversation. I need to hear this. I don't want to, he said at the time, which is very big of him to say, he said, I don't want to make this mistake again with somebody else. So it was a good conversation. And the great thing was we then had 2 amazing years. Like at that point, I was able to go, Sergey, you just coach me. Tell me what to do. I'm your pupil. I'll just listen. I'll just come in and learn. And those last 2 years of my career were just unbelievable.
That was like 2018, 2019.
Yeah, I just loved them so much. The problem was at that point, I'd like mentally arrived at the point I needed to be at, but my body was gone.
Yeah, okay.
And I think you need those two things. They need to align just at the right time. And I think for me, unfortunately, I'd like mentally matured as an athlete, just way after my physical prime, and I wasn't able to.
And I think that's a really good thing that you've done. I talk a lot about what you put into your podcast and the content that you have in them. I talk a lot about that with my teammates and with my coaches. Right, and one thing that's really stood out to me that you have taken on is your hindsight and your recall of your career is really honest and really almost transformative, and it's reflective of what you're saying right there, where just later on in your career you started to then realize maybe the importance of like a healthy mindset, of that positive attitude. And I feel like everybody's guilty of falling into that slump of sacrificing too much happiness for the pursuit of a goal.
Yeah. I feel very lucky, Rhys. I feel very lucky that I experienced the Olympic Games and like that crazy experience that Lewis was in 2012, which was wild as a 19-year-old kid, and then almost having it taken away from me when I had my ankle injury. And then the experience as I then had at the end of my career, because I kind of like, I got taken off the British team, I was working for my dad as a builder and turning up. So I'd be on the building site at 8 o'clock in the morning and then be going to the gym to train like for 4, 5, 6 hours later that day. It was very humbling. Do you know what I mean? It was like, wow, you've gone from there down to like here, but actually like nobody's making you be here. You just want to be here. Yeah. And it was a great experience. It was brilliant. I feel very grateful to have had those experiences.
Yeah, well, it's interesting you kind of highlight your career like that, where it's like the peak and then it kind of, the results, face value decline, but what you had from gymnastics or what you got from gymnastics, that's not the same graph.
I couldn't see that. Yeah. I was just blinded. I couldn't see any of that stuff. Now I see it and I'm like, wow, like gymnastics has given me such an incredible life. Like I wouldn't be where I am today. I wouldn't have a house, wouldn't be able to get married. We went traveling. I've got a little boy. like what Sergey's given me, like the gift he's given me of teaching me the sport of gymnastics. Oh, it's just so special. Because now, like I quit school when I was pretty much 14, but my safety net is gymnastics. I could go anywhere in the world and teach gymnastics. Yeah. And I'll probably get paid to do that, which is amazing. What an amazing thing. It is. So like when I decided to then go kind of freelance and start my own thing, it wasn't really a risk because I've always got gymnastics, and I could rock up to any country in the world and find a gym and they'll probably have me, and I can teach recreational gymnastics and I'd be quite happy doing it. So yeah, no, I feel very grateful for that. What's next for you? What's the next 4 years look like, Rhys? Like, is LA a big goal? Is that something you're thinking about already?
It's a big goal. It is. It's another thing still processing. That's my biggest life goal is accomplished. I definitely feel like these next 4 years, the thing that'll be driving me is my enjoyment for the sport. It's a big adjustment. It is. Like, not that my life has changed dramatically, financially, or, you know, I'm not famous to the point of it disrupting my life at all, really. It's just changed in my psyche. It's a big adjustment to make, you know, because it is ultimately a goal that I've been chasing for my whole career. When it's done, it's done. So now I gotta try to kind of gather motivation from elsewhere to motivate myself to do it again. You know, do another Worlds, try progress in gymnastics as much as possible, but then also kind of prepare for life outside of gymnastics as well. I'm finishing up renovating the house, and going to move in the next couple of weeks, next week pretty much, with my girlfriend. So it's an exciting time where I can kind of start to think about that stuff. And I remember really vividly, actually, it's before my first world title, if you had to ask me, so what do you think, Rhys, marriage, kids? I've been like, that's so far away. That is so far away. Like, you know how much things I have to do before that happens. And I won Worlds, and all of a sudden I'm like, I could see settling down, having kids, like marrying my girlfriend. It's the weirdest thing. It just kind of showed me how much weight I carried with those achievements, or potential achievements even. And then once they were accomplished, then I'm like, okay, I'm allowing myself to do other things now. Yeah. I feel a lot less guilty in my life after I've won Olympics, which is a crazy thing, because I'm now realizing how much guilt I felt before I'd accomplished world title and Olympic title.
Guilt in what way, Rhys?
So take even what we're doing now, I would kind of be checking in on the time, saying, oh, it's like 9 o'clock, I should be resting right now. Yeah. I should be watching gymnastics footage. I should be watching my training footage from today over and over and over again. That's the kind of guilt that would always just be lingering, although I wouldn't demonstrate it all the time. Yeah. But every kind of social interaction, every wasted minute in the day would be kind of guilt-ridden, if I'm honest, because of how much I wanted that one goal. And now I've found that I have a lot more energy, because that guilty side of me it's not completely gone. Yeah. Because I feel like it does push you a little bit, it holds you accountable, but I'm not feeling it anywhere near as much anymore.
How do you feel about the new code of points in your pommel routine? Is it something that you've looked at a lot already? Do you feel like it's going to probably change over the course of the 4 years? Do you like the new code and the changes that they made?
I always it's very rare that I see a new code of points or rule changes and I don't agree with them. Like I kind of welcome the change. It kind of just shows the evolution of the sport. When it comes to this new code, it'll be definitely very exciting, because you're seeing shorter routines. You're seeing probably more risk, more emphasis on execution. You know, if somebody makes a mistake, it's more significant, 20% more significant pretty much. So yeah, it'll be exciting. I look forward to seeing how it's scored and how the competitions pan out.
Do you think it's going to potentially bring everybody together closer in terms of the all-arounders, the teams, and then potentially the specialists as well?
Yeah, I haven't thought too much about all-rounders and teams. I would guess so. Again, just the mistakes, the falls are more significant then because of the limited amount of skills. When it comes to apparatus, definitely the people that are doing the big difficulty, doing the standout skills, they're going to get rewarded for it. So the likes of Jake Jarman, you know, obviously with the double twist and double straights being upgraded, triple twist and double straights as well. Like, he's getting rewarded big time for it. So, and I think it should be. The guys doing triple back off rings, triple back off high bar, they're all getting rewarded. So I like it overall. I think it's really nice.
Tell us a little bit about the relationship with Red Bull, Rhys, because obviously I signed with Red Bull in 2011 when I was 18. And it was very exciting to see somebody else like signing with Red Bull and being a Red Bull athlete as a gymnast again. Just tell us a little bit about that relationship so far. Like, what have you done? Have you got any exciting projects like in the lineup? Because Red Bull obviously do those incredibly cool things.
Yeah, we've got some cool things lined up. Obviously, can't say anything about them because they're just these big projects. There's a lot of moving parts with it. So I'm excited to kind of show those, and they're definitely exciting. But it's great just to kind of have the likes of gymnastics associated with a brand like Red Bull. It's always been a dream of mine. I remember writing to Red Bull when I was 11 on my mum's email address saying, "Hi, I'm an up-and-coming gymnast. Do you want to sponsor me?" They didn't get back then, but it took another 15 years or so for them to actually sign me. But I signed with them just before the Olympics, and you know, it's a difficult thing because there's no other gymnasts partnered with Red Bull.
Yeah.
So you're not only kind of like pitching yourself to them, you're trying to pitch a whole sport and just show how awesome gymnastics is. Thankfully, they took me on after a long time of negotiating and talking, convincing almost. We crossed the line, thankfully, just before the Olympics. It was like the day before European final, actually, last year. So it was a very happy day when that got ticked off the list.
Are you hopeful, Rhys, that maybe in the future there'll be gymnastics might get the spotlight that it deserves? And what might that look like? And how do you see that potentially happening? I feel like in Paris, gymnastics had a bit of a moment in terms of the Simone documentary on Netflix. And then obviously over in America, having Steven go viral for his routine in the team final. And there was a big deal made around the
Does it not have its moment now?
I think it does, but what I mean is, like, do you think we could have like a Simone Biles of men's gymnastics? Do you think the sport is positioned to have that? Or do you think it's just so many young girls do gymnastics that audience there is huge, is a lot bigger? I think as we go into LA, right, like everything in America is bigger and better and supersized. Like, this is probably the moment in the next 4 years to like, and maybe you working with people like Red Bull or something, there could be something done. You know, like Live Golf in golf. Is But you just don't think, do you not think that gymnastics is set up that way to be that kind of sport? And actually, it's the beauty is in the Olympic performances and the classic traditional gymnastics. Yeah,
I like the latter. I feel like it's...
We don't need to make it something it's not.
Yeah, maybe it's just I see definitely what you're saying, but when I think about sports that kind of are the way you're describing, to have like the next, to have the next Simone Biles of men's gymnastics, you need to be so unbelievably dominant, and I don't think gymnastics is set up in a way to cater to that almost. I mean, it was almost unfortunate that Uchimura didn't speak English.
Yeah.
Because he could have been that. But we all know how rare that is to come across a gymnast like Kohei Uchimura or Simone Biles. I I hope somebody is like that. But I feel like the dominance part of it is the requirement almost.
Okay.
The reason people watch gymnastics is who's going to get the gold medal. It's not kind of who's going to, even in like NBA, there's great basketball players that don't win the championship every year, but they're still like really great players. I don't think that's possible to almost identify those for the general public. But for gymnastics fans, we can. And I don't see an issue with people really enjoying the sport. And we've seen plenty of examples of people that, weren't even involved in sport and gymnastics altogether, just becoming a huge amount of gymnastics fans. And but it's another question, bringing it to general public, I think.
Do you think something like that will crop up in the next few years? Do you think there'll be like a league or something? You obviously have the leagues in like Germany and France and Italy. Like I often thought about whether you could have almost like a league where you have the best team from Germany compete against the best team in Japan, compete against the best team in France, and then the best college team in America, and there's like some kind of...
That'd be cool.
But you'd need like a big backer, right? Like someone with a lot of money to get behind something like that.
Yeah, and coverage is a big thing.
It's just not on TV much.
It's not on TV. It's not on the internet. I tried to watch the World Cups last week. FIG were just like, no, we didn't. We recorded it all. We just didn't sell it to anybody, so nobody gets to watch it. It's like something needs to be done there.
Yeah.
There needs to be just coverage, and yeah, I'm sure it is financial. Like obviously, you're not gonna film an entire event and then just not like give it away for free, but. I don't know the answer to this, but the coverage is what is really missing from... Yeah. I'm the biggest gymnastics fan, and I'm trying to watch these World Cups, and I cannot for the life of me find the stream or...
Yeah, that's a problem, right?
It's a real problem, yeah.
That's a big problem. Rhys, just to finish up, what do you hope for the future of Irish gymnastics and that next generation of kids that are coming through that have maybe watched you now and seen the incredible things that you've achieved? And also... what are your hopes for yourself for the future?
First of all, for Irish gymnastics, I feel like this is a really promising time. I want there to be a lot of emphasis on younger gymnasts and coaches as well. Young coaches, very important for them to kind of gain the knowledge and the passion that are needed in this very challenging and difficult sport. I'm seeing coaches here and there crop up that have real promise on the island, so I look forward to what they have to bring to the table. I hope that we can create some kind of system of working together and not against each other, and we need to kind of first of all set our standards so high, like myself and Luke have already done with our accomplishments, but keep those standards high and then work together as a team to build up to those accomplishments as well. And I want gymnasts to beat my achievements from this country. I want them to surpass my achievements by a long shot. I want to help in any way I can as well. I think for now the way I can do that is by visiting clubs, visiting schools, showing my medal to as many young gymnasts as possible to show them what is possible in the sport. It's something I know that I would have taken a huge amount of inspiration from if there was an Irish gymnast that came before me that had an Olympic medal in their possession. So I want to really bring that to as many kids as possible. What's the next point for...
And then personally, what your hopes for the future? Yeah. You spoke a little bit there. You obviously you got your house renovated. You got your partner. You kind of mentioned the word kids.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
What do you hope? Are you starting to look at like life outside of just gymnastics and maybe what that chapter after gymnastics might look like, or maybe those two chapters being combined? So,
I've thought about it a lot. I have, and I feel like the point that stands out to me most about what I want to kind of evolve into is a less selfish person. I know that sport in general, and gymnastics in particular, is a very selfish act. And that's not a negative overall. It's needed at times for sure. At the end of the day, it's you going up there on the pommel by yourself. You need to perform to get that medal. But I feel like now that I've accomplished everything I've wanted to accomplish in the sport, my focus should start to be a little more selfless. I should start to focus on the people around me, giving back to them, thanking them, being grateful for everything that they've given to facilitate what I've done in gymnastics, and also enjoy the sport to the very fullest. I'm not done yet, obviously. I'm wanting to achieve more in the sport, but I'll maybe just gather my motivation from a less necessity place, from how can I put it? Just from a more pure place, I feel. I guess it just comes down to that enjoyment of the sport overall, and I feel like that's going to be driving me in my remaining years in the sport.
Amazing, mate. Well, I have to say, Rhys, like, we've done one of these filming days now with Fabian Hambuchen, Olympic gold medalist on high bar, and yourself, and they say don't meet your heroes, but I'm always taken back by how generous yourself, but also Fabian was when we met him. You've given us so much of your time, and you're a very, very busy man, so we massively appreciate it. I know that the young athletes that listen to the podcast are going to love this episode, so thank you very much for your time, mate. Thank you for the memories as well. I genuinely think that pommel horse routine was one of the most perfect routines I've ever seen performed. I couldn't believe it when I was watching it. It was absolutely amazing, mate. Me and Ozzy sat and watched a lot of your YouTube vlogs at like 3 o'clock in the morning when he never used to sleep. So we would just watch them along, and that would keep me sane during a very difficult time in the beginning. So thank you, mate. We appreciate it, and hopefully we stay in touch, man, and I can follow the journey again for the next 4 years.
Sounds good.
Thank you, mate.
Thanks for coming to Ireland.
Top man.